à toutes et à tous.
Everyone. Some information to begin with for English speakers. Hello, everybody. If you want to follow the forum in English, please choose the English channel at the bottom of your screen by clicking on the button that looks like a globe. Thanks ever so much. My name is Charline Coudin. I'm a doctoral student at the University of Grenoble, UGA, and I am fortunate to be hosting this event today. There are many of you here today, and we would like to thank you studies in France and at the University of Grenoble, UGA. First of all, some instructions. To ensure that everything runs smoothly, please leave your microphones and cameras switched off. However, you can submit your questions in writing in French or English using the chat function, and we will collect and ask the questions for you. There will be two parts to this afternoon, a roundtable discussion on doctoral studies in general, with testimonials from doctoral students, and then a focus on international aspects. 60% of you are international students. You're from over 75 countries, according to our statistics, so I think you will be especially interested in this. Finally, you will then be able to join one of the 13 thematic doctoral schools and talk to their directors and doctoral students. At the University of Grenoble, doctoral studies are overseen by the Doctoral College, and so it is Pierre Lemonde, the director of the Doctoral College, who will open this forum alongside me. Hello, Pierre. Hello, Charline. Pierre, so you are the director of the Doctoral College. You are also a research director at the CNRS, the National Research Organization, and as such, you conduct your research in quantum physics at the Neil Institute. Can you tell us in just a few words what the Doctoral College is? Thank you, Charlie. Hello, everybody. So the Doctoral College, as you've said, it's a part of the University of Grenoble, UGA, and it's responsible for the institution's doctoral policy. As such, it brings together 13 thematic doctoral schools on the site. Each doctoral student is enrolled in one of the 13 doctoral schools according to their scientific discipline. In fact, you will have the opportunity to meet them later on. Great, thank you very much. So what does the doctoral program at the University of Grenoble represent? Well, the PhD program, we're talking about 2,900 doctoral students, approximately 40% of whom are international. These students conduct research in our laboratories on a daily basis and contribute significantly to the university's scientific reach. It is, in fact, this scientific quality in particular that enables UGA to sit at the top of French and international rankings. Doing a PhD at UGA means benefiting from the highest level of qualification at one of the best universities. French PhDs are recognized worldwide, but a PhD at UGA is a passport to employment, particularly for international careers in both academia and business. In 2024, the European Patent Office ranked UGA as the leading European university in terms of patent filings. So UGA, with its ecosystem backed by major companies, is therefore a European flagship for innovation. Thank you very much for that very interesting piece of information. Would you like to say a final word to the students here with us today? Yes, I would just like to tell them that there is a big difference between a bachelor's or master's degree and a PhD. A PhD is a kind of first job. In fact, there are many ways to do a PhD, and that's what we're going to be seeing today. But what brings all PhD students together is that they do research. And in this period of major ecological and societal transitions, we are facing substantial challenges such as global warming, ecological transition, democracy and how it is represented, new economies, international law, technological innovations, etc. So to respond to these challenges and find solutions, we need research in all of these areas. We therefore need doctoral students, we need you. So I hope we can convince you to pursue a PhD. Now, before I give the floor to Charlene, who's in her third year of her PhD at the Doctoral School of Earth, Environmental and Planetary Sciences, ED-STEPS, I would like to point out that she is, in fact, the 2025 winner of the Grenoble Academy's Scientific Popularization Competition, my thesis in 180 seconds, as well as the High School Students' Prize at local, but also at national level. So I'd like to thank you very much for agreeing to host this event, Charlene. Thank you very much, Pierre. We're now going to move on to the roundtable discussion. So we're going to be able to start our roundtable overview of doctoral studies. So the objective is to explain what a PhD is, why you might want to do one, and above all, how to go about it. You will soon realize that this is very different from the studies you have undertaken so far. To help us with this first part, I have 4 speakers here with me, and I'll introduce them now. Zoe Masson, hello. Hello. So you are a doctor. You completed your thesis at the Doctoral School of Management Sciences, EDSG, at the Center for Applied Management Studies and Research, the CERAG. You joined the laboratory after your thesis as you were recruited as a lecturer. Can you tell us what was your research about? Yes, of course. So during my thesis, I studied different performance conditions inside online innovation communities. In other words, for about 3 years, I studied how members of a community online contribute in a qualitative, quantitative, and creative manner to innovation in various fields. Thank you very much. Now let me turn. Michela Acciero. Hello, hello. So you've been a doctor just for a few days now because you defended your thesis at the end of October, so congratulations on that. You did your thesis at the Doctoral School of Engineering and Materials, Mechanics, the Environment, Energy, Processes and Production, that's the EDI-MEP squared, in joint supervision with the University of Cassino in Italy. In France, this research is carried out at the Soils, Solids, Structures, Risks Laboratory, the 3SR Laboratory. Can you briefly describe the subject of your current research at the laboratory? Yes, thank you, of course. So the objective of my research was to study soil reinforcement method. So I studied in particular the mechanical properties and interactions between fibers that can be used to strengthen sand. And during my 3 years of research, I tried to understand and connect phenomenology of materials, so the mechanical side of things, with the microscopic side of things. So it was a multi-scale study so that I could really have a global understanding of the reinforcement mechanisms at play. Mohamed Wada Mabrouk, hello. Hello. So you are a doctoral student at the Doctoral School of Mathematics, Information Science and Technology and Computer Science. That's the EDE MSTII at the Grenoble Computer Science Laboratory, LIG. Can you also tell us what your research is about? Well, very quickly, my project focuses on modeling of historic data, so colors in old manuscripts. I look at language models, LLMs, the idea being to extract information from different sources, notably texts, images, physical and chemical analyses, the idea being to present knowledge, to present all of the dimensions of colors, for example, whatever the symbols, whatever the procedures behind them, to really understand the transmission of knowledge. Thank you very much. So I'll finish with you, Fabrice Emerio. Hello. So you are the Deputy Director of the Doctoral College in charge of education, but you are also a university professor. As such, you teach at Grenoble INP, NC3, and you conduct your research at the Soils, Solid Structures and Risks Laboratory. So that's the 3SR laboratory. So same thing. Could you say a few words about your research? So my research field, generally speaking, is civil engineering, but geotechnical dimensions and structures. All of these systems that make it possible to create an interaction between a civil engineering structure, the building, and the soil, the ground, so the foundations, underground structures like tunnels and other structures, transport infrastructures, roads, and railways. So my research covers all of the behavioral aspects of these structures. So there's a local scale, as Michaela said, but through to a global scale of concerning the structure itself. Thank you very much. I'm going to stay with you for the first questions. Now, first of all, what is a thesis? How long does it last? And perhaps we could clarify what a doctoral student is. Well, the first answer, what is a thesis? Well, we can use certain keywords to qualify it. A thesis is individual research work, which doesn't mean to say that it's completely done alone. It's usually done within a team, or at least with a supervision team. So it's individual research work, the aim of which is to develop technical and scientific knowledge. It aims to find problems, to find solutions to complex solutions. So the idea is to offer new approaches, new products possibly, and to validate these in a very methodological manner, but also to capitalize on the results of the research with the scientific community, but also with industry or with society at large. So a PhD, to answer the second question, lasts 3 years generally. So the research work is carried out full time. However, there is the possibility, perhaps in a limited way, but there are theses that can be done part-time, and there the duration might be a bit longer, 5, 6 years, let's say, generally speaking. And then the last question, what was it? What's a doctoral student? Yes, what is a doctoral student? A student who's quite special because the student has a double status, a student, but also a young professional. So this is something that is reflected in their research work, which is governed by a contract. So it's a first professional job for a doctoral student. And after the thesis, the doctor continues their professional career. So what are the differences between a master's degree and a PhD, would you say? Well, the master's degree, if I can simplify things, it's training, basic training, the aim of which is to allow students to accrue knowledge and skills, mainly by studying problems that have been well defined and for which there is a solution that is known but not formalized. But a thesis is work for which you've already got to define the problem, you've really got to define it first, and then there's no solution normally that exists. So you have to look for the solution either directly, or you have to adopt an approach that leads you to offer a suggestion. So, of course, the big question is how to write a thesis. So I suggest we look back at the career paths of our female PhD graduates and doctoral students here today. So Zoe, I believe you did your bachelor's degree in Montpellier. Could you just give us a summary of your educational background leading up to your thesis? Yes, of course. So I started with a bachelor's degree in law with a minor in political science. That was at Montpellier for 3 years. Then I went abroad as part of an Erasmus exchange, and I came back to do a first year of a master's degree in Toulouse before I was taken on another master's degree at Sciences Po Grenoble called Transmedia. So it changed its name recently. So I left Toulouse to come to Grenoble. My master's was shared between Annecy and Grenoble. I did my 2 years of the master's program here. It was highly professional, this master's degree. And it opened up, not necessarily logically into a thesis, but this was an idea that I liked a lot. And after that, do you want me to continue? Well, I ended up finding a thesis with a specific format, the CIFRE format, but we'll hear more about that later. So that's an industrial agreement for training through research, the CIFRE. Michaela, you are Italian and you naturally began your bachelor's degree in Italy. How did you end up doing your PhD at the University of Grenoble, UGA? Well, yes, as you said, I did my first degree in Italy, and then I did my first year and second year of master's degree. It was a joint degree. So I did my first year in Italy and my second year in France. So my first year, the reason why I wanted to do a master's with that was a joint degree. I don't know how you say it exactly, but it was a joint degree because I wanted to have some experience abroad. And my first year was during COVID, and I really wanted to get out and breathe. And when I saw that in Grenoble there were lots of mountains, I thought, why don't I go to Grenoble? And so I followed that path. So the master's that I did was at the 3SR lab. After that, because in the master's, in fact, the first 4 students were able to carry on with a PhD, and that's what happened. I was in the first 4. And so they offered me a PhD. And the university where I'd done my master's also suggested that I do a PhD with them. So I said, well, why not do a PhD under joint supervision, so between the 2 universities? And that's how that came about. Thank you. Mohamed Wadad, you studied in Sfax in Tunisia before coming to your PhD. Tell us a bit about your background. So I was born in Sibet in Tunisia, so it's on the coast, and this is where I did my mathematics high school certificate. Then I did a preparatory class in mathematics and physics, and then I did 3 years of engineering, IT engineering. That was at Sfax in Tunisia, and at the end of that, I did a 6-month internship for a study. So that was at the INSA in Strasbourg, in the iCube lab. So there we are. That's when I really discovered what scientific research actually was and what the academic world was. And so that's why I continued. So that's something that I share with you. I come from an engineering school too. Okay, so to do a thesis, there are many ways to go about things. So let's continue now. Fabrice, what are the prerequisites for applying to do a PhD? Well, the prerequisites are defined by the decree in France. So the entrance diplomas are a French master's, an engineering diploma that is worth a master's, can also allow you to move into a PhD straight away. There are students who follow other training programs in France or abroad, but for those students to be able to do a PhD in Grenoble, but also in any other university in France, it's the same approach that applies. They have to obtain an equivalence or some kind of exemption so that they can be recruited. Okay, thank you. So Zoe, Michaela, and Wada, can you tell me, based on what you've described, how you actually found your thesis topic, your supervisor, your laboratory, and your financing? Yes. Do you want to start? Yes. So for me, wasn't exactly a logical follow-on because I'd done something in my master's which was very professional, but I'd heard about the CIFRE, so an industrial agreement for training through research, and I thought that was interesting. So I contacted the person who mentioned it to me, and we had an exchange about it. The person described what it was, how it worked, and I really liked the idea. And I said, well, if you hear anything, I like that idea. And this person worked as part of the masters, so we belonged to the same environment. And so I think the stars just aligned basically because we had another chat. I was in Paris at the time finishing my studies, and he knew somebody, so a professor who became my thesis supervisor. So that person worked with a company called ISSO, and they had a research project that involved a PhD. And so he sent in my application. It seemed like a job application, but in fact, I met up then with the future thesis supervisor and the company. So it was a bit like going to a job interview, and I was taken on and started my thesis. So we'll follow on. So at the end of my bachelor's, I had an experience as an intern in a research lab in geotechnical engineering, and I liked that experience. So when I chose to do the joint master's degree, I looked at whether there were any possibilities afterwards, given my master's, whether that might lead into a PhD. So I already had that in mind, that I wanted to do a PhD. And the masters that I followed, as I explained before, included that possibility. Students with their highest marks could access a PhD program. So it's pretty easy, I would say, to realize that idea. But then, of course, it was more complicated to find a topic that the supervisors in France and Italy agreed with, because it was a joint supervision PhD that I did. And the conditions for research change according to each country. In Italy, for example, it's very important to have a focus on the practical side of things. Now, in my master's, I'd worked in geotechnical engineering, and so this is a very application-based field. In the 3SR lab, it was important to focus on the study of technology, not necessarily the application itself. And so that's why we had a lot of discussions with my supervisors. And at the end of the day, we found a topic that was good for both universities. So how did I find the people who I was able to do my PhD with, the supervisors? Well, there wasn't a real, like with Zoe, there wasn't a real, position with the thesis subject somewhere. But basically, I sat a public competition in Italy to have the grant for my PhD. So it's Italy financed my PhD. So when you sit a public entrance exam with the subject, and I'd already talked about the subject with the supervisors, so then there's an oral exam, and according to your master's marks, you're ranked and you might win or not, depending on how the others do. So I actually won the competition, and that's how it all started. So at the end of my internship in Strasbourg, so I received an offer for a thesis and I applied. And after talking with my supervisor, I thought that the subject was really in line with my expectations and my interests. And it kind of corresponded with my marks, and that's how I started my thesis. That's great. So an important point is that even if the institution checks that the student has the right level for recruiting them, it's also very important that students also check that the team and the conditions are appropriate for them. Fabrice, who are the main people supporting the doctoral student? Well, for a PhD, you've got a doctoral student who's under the scientific responsibility of a thesis supervisor. Now, that can be shared between several people, the supervision. As we've heard already, you can have a supervisor in France and a supervisor somewhere else, or you can have two supervisors in two different universities in France. You can also have, in the global time, other supervisors. It really varies according to each situation. You can have one supervisor or even four supervisors and people who are responsible for you. Then the next choice is the doctoral school. So you sign up to a doctoral school. And the fourth aspect is the research laboratory where you will work. So generally speaking, this is where your supervisor is based. It's the place where the doctoral student will work on a permanent basis. So with an office, a computer, experimental resources, etc. I would just add a fifth aspect. So doctoral students are often in contact with the industrial sector. We've talked about the CIFRE, Industrial Agreement for Research. Not all theses are managed by this kind of contract. You can have direct collaboration between an industrialist and a lab as well. So that's a fifth actor involved in the doctoral studies. So now let's look at the difference in practice between humanities and social sciences and the fields of science, technology, and health. Could you explain this? Well, this might be a bit caricatural, what I'm going to say. So, differences between humanities and social sciences and science, technology, and health. One of the main differences, I would say, in one, the thesis subject is already well defined. So the doctoral student is recruited, a bit like somebody being recruited for a job. Whereas when it comes to humanities and social sciences, it's the doctoral student who shows their subject, defines it, specifies, argues, and then obtains the blessing, let's say, of the supervisor, or at least an agreement to act as supervisor for the 3 years of the thesis. Now, another difference, I don't know whether it's relative to the difference in fields, but it might come from the type of financing, the possibility of getting financing. Financing, generally speaking, when you answer a call for a thesis, just like with a job offer, financing is often already defined. But when the doctoral student proposes the subject, which is what Michela did in Italy, there's also a kind of a contest for the financing of the topic. But once again, I don't want us to be this caricatural, really. It's a kind of a continuum between all of the different fields. In fact, there are lots of different situations that might apply according to the disciplines. So the students here in this forum are not in Grenoble mainly. Some are even abroad. So how or where can they find a thesis topic? Well, If the thesis subject is already set, if there's already financing, generally speaking, it's presented, it's advertised on the university's website, the laboratory's website, the laboratory that's going to be leading the thesis. But it also, there are tools, national tools, such as the AGUM platform, and the University of Grenoble is part of that. So that can also put forward different subjects. And then there are other information transmission vectors. For example, there might be associations, notably in France. There's the Bernard Grégory Association that makes it possible for a supervisor to advertise a subject. And that and what might be seen from abroad directly is the advertising of thesis subjects on the Campus France platform. That's another possibility for viewing or finding a subject that already has been defined. Now, when subjects have not yet been defined or they need more maturing, the advice is to work with local lecturers, local supervisors who have contact with universities, or they know people who might be interested in the idea, and there might be an exchange in order to specify the thesis subject. And that will also lead to information about financing. Thank you very much. So we've already talked a little bit about financing. Can you say a little bit more about the kind of financing that exists? Well, there's a broad panel of financing, let's say. So basically, we've got financing that is given by the French state or financing that is given by the foreign state in the case of an international project. So this is what we refer to as doctoral contracts. So this might come from an entrance exam or a competition, and that the applicant might apply within the framework of the competition. So this concerns perhaps 10% of UGA theses. And then you have research project financing. So projects might be financed by the ANR, so the National Research Agency, or other French organizations that might finance research projects. So generally speaking, there's a work agreement set up, and that's coordinated by the establishment, and the financing comes from the agency or association. We've got the same thing when it comes for foreign financing, notably European financing. The European Union finances some research projects, for example. Earlier on, we talked about the industrial sector. The industrial sector might also directly finance a doctoral student via a work agreement, via a CIFRE agreement, or indirectly as part of a research contract with the laboratory. Then there are other financing solutions based on grants, but these usually come from foreign countries. They might come via agencies based in France, but generally speaking, most financing, most doctoral students are financed for their research. I forgot the specific case of theses that might be carried out part-time. So this is mainly the case of people who already have a job in a company or in a public entity, and they get the authorization to spend part of their time doing a thesis. So this is part-time research and it's spread over time. I think I've covered all of the different possibilities that, yes, great, thank you. So as you said several times, we've talked about the CIFRE thesis, so 10% of theses are industrial research theses. So let's just focus on this thesis format because there are many advantages and it's not always very well known. So here we have Zoe, who did her thesis thanks to an industrial agreement, so an agreement between a research laboratory, a company, or a local authority. So the doctoral student has a 3-year short-term contract or even a permanent contract. So the French state provides a subsidy of 14,000 euros, so that's pretty advantageous. So only 10% of these industrial research theses remain at the minimum salary level. On average, they are worth more than 31,000 euros and can rise to over 60,000. As doctoral students have one foot in the company, there is a high percentage of subsequent recruitment, about 90% 6 months after the thesis. So the CIFRE agreements are also open to foreign nationals and under joint supervision. Zoe, can you tell us about your experience with your CIFRE industrial research thesis? What did you gain from it? What steps did you have to take? Okay, my experience globally. So you've really described what the CIFRE is. So I had a permanent contract with the company. They took me on permanently, the company. So that was pretty comfortable. I didn't have to worry about what was going to happen at the end of my thesis. So this experience was really interesting to have one foot in industry, in a company, and then another in research. So how did this happen? Well, there are lots of different formats. Each CIFRE contract is unique, I'd say. I spent a lot of time in my company. I worked once on my thesis, so I worked on the community that had been developed by my company. And so that was what fueled my thesis. But at the same time, I worked a lot for the company on real subjects that were dealt with on a day-to-day basis, or lots of customer-specific subjects. So I had a real job. So that wasn't always linked to my thesis. That was, in fact, sometimes quite removed from the subject of my thesis, but it was a very rich experience. I had a kind of two things that I had to do. I knew that after my thesis, I could continue in that job if I wanted to. So that was a big advantage. And then there was all the research work that I continued to do at the same time. So I was there managing a community. I was able to test things on the community. So everything that I tested in my company, I could then use for my research. And then there was a kind of virtuous circle. Yes, I describe it like that. I was able to do research to see what was being done from an academic point of view, and then apply that on a day-to-day basis in my job. So it was really interesting to have that dual role and dual skills. After 3.5 years of thesis work, I was in charge of studies and I could continue my research. Was there another question? No, that's great. You really have given us a full answer. So now let's talk about motivations. Why do a thesis? Why, what did it give you? What were your criteria? So I can start maybe. So at the end of my 3rd year of studies, I already had experience in a research lab. And I thought that it was really interesting, everything that I was doing, being able to apply research to samples and do tests on materials and see, a completely new
C'était
result.
quelque chose
It
que
was
j'ai trouvé
something that I
incroyable.
thought
Le
was
fait,
incredible.
quelqu'un il l'a pas fait,
You know,
c'est la première
I
personne qui
was
a
the
fait ça,
first
bah, c'est
person
trop bien.
doing these
C'est la première
things.
courbe sur cet
So
matériau.
that
Donc,
was great.
c'était
I was
déjà,
the first
bah,
person
pour
doing
moi,
that
il y a
with that
un peu,
material.
j'étais déjà passionnée un petit
So
peu
I was already
pour
pretty
la découverte
passionate
des choses.
in
Après,
terms of
je savais pas
discovering
encore sur
things.
quel domaine,
I didn't
mais
know,
le fait d'avoir
you
la
know, the
possibilité d'étudier quelque
fields
chose que
possible for
personne n'avait
applying
étudié avant ou de
what I was doing.
continuer
So I wondered whether to continue
d'un
that
des
or
détails que
to
j'étais pas
go
encore
further into
bien évolué,
detail.
bah, c'était quelque chose que
So it
ça
was
me donnait vraiment
something that
l'envie
really
de
made me
faire
want
la recherche
to
pour ça.
do research.
Donc il y a cette côté,
So
donc
there's
un peu
that
la
side of
passion
things, the
innée,
passion, the
donc la
innate
volonté
passion,
vraiment de découvrir
the
quelque
wish to
chose.
discover
Et
something.
la deuxième chose qui était
And then the
vraiment,
second
ça
thing
m'a vraiment donné l'envie
that really
de
made
faire un
me want
doctorat,
to do a PhD
c'était la connaissance
was
de la communauté scientifique
knowing
qui
the
à la base
scientific
est très très très
community
internationale.
and
Et
that was very
je pense
international. So their
c'était une
knowledge.
idée que j'avais avant de commencer le doctorat.
So before my
Mais c'est quelque chose
PhD, I
qui
knew
ça m'a
this,
vraiment,
but
c'était vraiment confirmé
it was confirmed
pendant le doctorat même.
during my PhD
Donc,
studies.
avoir la
So
possibilité de
having the
rencontrer,
possibility of
mais je parle pas
meeting
que
people,
de
I'm
la
not
partie
just talking
recherche,
about the research side of
pour le
things.
côté humain,
I'm talking
de
about the
rencontrer
human
des
side
gens
of
qui
things,
viennent
meeting people who come from
de tout,
all
de
walks of
partout
life,
du
from
monde,
everywhere
de
in the world,
partager les expériences,
sharing
avoir cette
experiences
partie d'échange, et c'est vraiment enrichissant.
and be
Donc, de
able
mon
to
côté,
exchange with them. It was
j'ai eu
really,
la
really
possibilité donc de
enriching.
faire la
So
recherche
I was able to
d'un
do
sujet que j'aimais
research
bien
on a
et donc
subject that I loved,
j'ai eu la possibilité d'être
and
dans un
I was
laboratoire
in a
parce que mon
lab
doctorat, c'était
because my PhD
expérimental. Donc il y
uh,
avait toute la partie dans le labo avec
was
les
in the
tests que
lab with
j'adore. Donc
tests.
j'avais mes petites courbes toutes
So
faites
I had my
et après le côté humain
graphs
parce
and
que
curves.
bah, c'est pas comme un
And then there
doctorat
was the
strict
human
où
side of
toi, tu
things.
as ton
It
sujet,
wasn't like a
comme
CIFRE
expliqué avant
PhD, as we've just
Fabrice,
heard from
mais
Fabrice.
donc en théorie, tu es un peu toute seule. Donc
So
tu as ton
you're a
sujet et
little
c'est
bit
à toi
alone. You have
de
your subject. It's
continuer
up to
et
you
de
to
développer
continue and
tous les
to
parties de ton
develop
sujet.
all of the
En même
areas
temps,
of
tu
your
as tes
subject. At the
intervenants
same time,
qui
there are
sont
supervisors
fondamentaux,
there, and they're
je
very, very
pense, pendant
important
ton parcours,
throughout your
avec
PhD.
lesquels tu partages
So you
tout,
share everything
donc
with
tes
them,
résultats,
your
tes
results,
ambitions,
your
tes idées.
ambitions, your ideas.
Mais pendant le doctorat même,
But
tu as la
during the
possibilité
PhD
d'interagir
itself, you can
avec plein d'autres
interact with
doctorants
lots of
et
other
partager
doctoral
tes
students,
expériences. Ou si tu as
share your
envie, tu peux
experience,
aussi
and you can also,
participer à d'autres
if you
projets,
want,
aider
take
les
part in
autres.
other
Et
projects,
dans mon
help other
cas, c'est ce qui
people.
s'est passé.
And this
Donc,
is what happened for me,
surtout en France, parce que le
especially in France,
laboratoire
because
3SR,
the
c'est très
3SR lab
international.
is a highly
J'ai eu la
international
possibilité donc
laboratory.
de travailler
So I
sur
was
d'autres
able to
sujets
work on
juste
other
pour aider
subjects
les
just to
autres
help
lorsqu'ils
the others
utilisaient, par
because
exemple,
they were
une
using
machine dans le
a
laboratoire que
machine,
moi,
one of
j'avais
the
pas la
lab
possibilité
machines, and
d'utiliser. Et
I
donc,
was able to use
c'était
that
un
machine as
partage
well.
des
So
connaissances.
there was a
Est-ce que
lot of
tu peux aider cette
knowledge
personne
sharing.
à faire
Can
ça?
you help this
Moi,
person
j'adore
to do
ça,
that? I
être
love
avec
helping
l'équipe.
people. I
C'est
love
quelque chose que
teamwork. It's something
ça me
that
donne
really boosts me,
plus que ma recherche perso.
sometimes
Et
more
donc, j'ai eu
so
la
than my
possibilité
personal
quand même
research. So,
d'échanger beaucoup avec
I
les autres.
really had the
Donc,
opportunity to do
tu es toute
exchange a lot
seule,
with the
mais
others.
quand tu es
So
dans
you're on
l'équipe,
your own,
ça
but you're never
c'est
really
très
on
bien.
your own.
Mais
So
je trouve
that's
que c'est
what's
très
good.
important dans mon cas
It's very
personnel.
important in my
C'était très
personal
important
case. It
d'avoir
was
des
very
encadrants
important
qui
to
m'ont
have
toujours,
supervisors
toujours suivi,
who
qui m'ont
always
jamais
followed me,
abandonné.
who never abandoned
Donc, je me
me.
suis jamais sentie toute seule, mais le sujet
So I never felt
semblait
alone.
jusqu'à la fin, jusqu'à la
You
semaine
know,
dernière, là, que
right
c'était
up until
une
last week,
responsabilité
you know,
d'arriver à la fin,
when I was on the
de
finish
montrer
line,
que j'avais quand même
I
fait
wanted
quelque
to
chose pour
show that
3
I'd
ans et
done
arriver
something for
à
3 years.
concrétiser les
It,
efforts de 3 ans.
all my
Donc,
efforts had
ouais,
become
c'est ça.
concrete after 3 years of
Et
work.
pour vous, du coup?
What about for you?
Pour moi, au début, j'avais pas
Well, to
l'idée
begin with,
d'enchaîner mon parcours avec une
I
thèse.
didn't think
Je me
that I
disais,
would
ce que
continue
j'ai fait
on
est
with a
déjà
PhD.
suffisant pour
I
avoir
thought I'd done a
bon
lot
poste
already
avec
to have a good
un bon
job
salaire.
with a good salary.
Mais justement, après mon
But
stage
in fact,
de
after
recherche au
my
labo
research
de Strasbourg,
internship at the lab in
j'ai complètement
Strasbourg,
changé mon mindset,
I
ma manière de
my
penser.
mindset completely
Et car
changed
j'avais envie
because
d'aller
I
plus loin
really wanted to go
et
further.
contribuer
and contribute
contribuer à la production des
to
nouvelles
the
connaissances.
production of new knowledge.
Et après, ce qui m'a plus encouragé,
And
le
then
fait
something else encouraged me,
que j'ai toujours aimé
the
combiner des
fact that I
approches
always
techniques
liked
et méthodologiques,
combining
comme
technical and
modélisation de
methodological
connaissances, intelligence
projects
artificielle,
like
etc.,
artificial
à des questions,
intelligence, knowledge management,
pas de questions existentielles, mais des questions qui
and
sont
other questions,
reliées à
not
la
necessarily
culture,
existential, but questions
à
linked to
l'histoire.
culture,
Et ben voilà.
history,
Ouais, mais
and
c'est
there we
souvent quelque
are.
chose qui revient,
Yes,
c'est
this is often
quand
something
on
that
sort du
comes
parcours
back when
d'ingénieur,
you come
il y
from
a une facilité,
engineering.
c'est
It's
de
easy,
prendre.
isn't
Dans
it?
le domaine de
Yes,
l'informatique,
Ouais,
especially in the
mais en
IT
fait,
field.
c'est important, et je pense
Yeah,
qu'on l'a
but
vu
it's
avec
important. I think we've
vos
seen
deux,
that
donc vos deux
with
réponses, c'est
your two
les
answers.
vocations et l'envie
There's
vraiment
this
de faire de la
vocation,
recherche,
this
mais aussi
wish
de
to do
développer une
research, but
expertise du
also
coup
to
dans des
develop
domaines précis.
expertise
Et il
in
faut
a very
savoir que quand même le
specific
doctorat, c'est
field.
aussi une porte
And a
d'entrée
PhD
préinternationale,
is an
et
entrance way
voilà, ça nous
for
apporte pas mal de
international
compétences.
mobility
Après,
because
si
of
je peux
the
ajouter, des
skills that you
fois,
accrue. If
je
I may
pense
just
qu'on
add
est tous
something,
pareils, on
I
n'est
think
pas
we're
vraiment
all the
des étudiants
same.
avant de
We're just
commencer un
students
doctorat, on est
before we
comme nous
start a
notre master.
PhD. We've just
On
finished
a
our
envie
masters.
d'avoir aussi
You know,
une
we want to have
stabilité,
some
de
form of
commencer déjà à
stability.
travailler
We
parce
want
que
to
je veux
start to
dire,
work
on a
because,
étudié
we've been
plusieurs
studying
années
already
aussi
for
pour
several
avoir quelque chose que
years.
ça nous donne de la satisfaction.
And
Et
so
donc,
we
des
need
fois,
to have something
moi,
that gives us
j'ai ressenti
satisfaction.
pendant les 3 années,
So
des fois,
during the
d'avoir
3
peur
years,
pour l'après. Mais
I felt
honnêtement,
this fear
petit à
for
petit,
what was coming
j'ai
afterwards,
poursuivi
but
pendant
little
mes
by
années de
little,
doctorat. La
during
peur
my
s'est enlevée
PhD time, the
grâce au fait,
fear
et c'est vrai que
dissolved
pendant les trois
thanks
années,
to
tu
the fact
développes
that,
vraiment des
well, you
compétences
develop real
et
skills during
tu
your
te sens de plus
PhD.
en plus sûr de
Increasingly,
toi.
you feel
Et
very
il y a
confident
des
in
possibilités
yourself.
après. Donc,
And you know that there
mais
are
au début,
possibilities afterwards.
j'ai
But to
ressenti
begin with,
d'avoir peur
I was a little bit afraid
de
you
faire le
know,
mauvais choix,
of
entre
making the
guillemets,
wrong
pour
choice, so
avoir
to
peur de
speak.
s'éloigner, par exemple, avec un
You
parcours
know,
d'ingénieur.
after
Après, tu commences une
after
recherche, c'est pas tout à
engineering,
fait, c'est
and
pas
then
toujours
you do research
lié avec ce que tu fais dans la
that's
pratique
not always linked
de
with what you've
l'ingénieur,
done in
d'un ingénieur.
engineering.
Mais honnêtement,
But
avec les années, la peur,
over the years,
là, elle est
my
plus là. Donc,
fear
je trouve que
dissipated.
c'est bien ça.
That's
Parfait.
great.
Question spécifique à
So a
Fabrice.
specific question for
Lorsqu'on fait une
Fabrice
thèse
now.
en
When you do a
SHS, pourquoi
thesis,
faire une thèse quand on est déjà salarié?
why would you do a thesis if you're already employed?
C'est
I'm
la
sorry,
première question.
it's
C'est
the first
quand tu fais
question.
une thèse en SHS, du coup,
When you do
qu'est-ce
a
qui se passe?
question
Et
in
la deuxième question, c'est
social sciences
pourquoi
and
faire une thèse quand on est déjà
humanities,
salarié?
why would you do this? And why would you do this if you already have a job? So when you have a job already and you have the idea of doing a thesis, it's usually because you're not very satisfied personally with your job, with what you're doing. There's something missing. So you want to dig into subjects a bit further. You want to go further and develop things that you don't have as part of your job. So often that's the main reason. Before even, the idea of changing jobs, you think about this missing feeling, what wish to dig into things further, to really dig into things and to provide solutions to questions that might be quite thorny compared with your job. Now, for social sciences and humanities theses, I'm maybe not the best person to answer that question because it's not my specific field. But I think there again, it's the idea of developing knowledge and making a contribution, contributing knowledge generally to society, being able to put forward answers to questions that haven't yet been addressed and that may not have a concrete application straight away. So it's general knowledge production. So what's the next step for you today? Do you want to continue with your research?
Moi, du coup, oui, je me vois
Yes, I
continuer
see
dans la
myself
recherche, de fait.
continuing with
J'ai
my
passé des maîtresses de
research.
conférences
I
l'année
started
dernière.
work as a
C'était pas
lecturer last year.
En fait, quand j'étais en thèse CIFRE, ce
When
que
I
j'aimais
was doing
beaucoup,
my
c'était justement
CIFRE
ce côté à la fois
research,
académique
So there was the academic side and the business side that I liked. But after my thesis, I continued working for the company for a year. And I missed research, basically. So I said to myself, okay, I'll qualify. Why not? So that I can get a foot back into the research world. And little by little, I applied for a position. So it was an opportunity that arose, and I seized that opportunity. So I became a lecturer last year, and I'm continuing in teaching and research at UGA. And what about you? Do you already have an idea? Well, as already mentioned, I defended my thesis not long ago at the end of October. So for the moment, I'm thinking of continuing with research. As Zoe said, I'm thinking about qualifying so that I can become a lecturer, but I'm not thinking of doing that now. I'd first of all like to have some postdoc experience. So not work. I don't want to work with the same teams though, not because I didn't like the teams, but I want to discover other subjects, other groups. I want to have some different experience with other research groups. And, you know, a postdoc lasts a year or 2 years. It really depends on the postdoc that you're doing. But maybe I'd come back to Grenoble or go somewhere else. But yes, I want to continue in the research world. What about you, Mohammed? I'm still in my first year. So I haven't really decided, but it will depend on the offers. Perhaps research is something that I will miss, as others have said. I don't know yet. I can't really say. So you can prepare for life after your thesis by developing your skills during your PhD. Fabrice, so what support is available and what assistance is provided? Well, before I answer the question, I'd just like to come back to what's just been said, just to give you a general statistic. Effectively, we did a study not long ago, a year ago, on the future of doctors. And we know that 40% of doctors continue with their academic or research career, or as a researcher and teacher. 20% continue to work as engineers, but with a focus on research and development. And the others, the remaining 40%, move into other fields. Not by default, but because they had an experience that provided them with skills that allows them to move into other fields. So the skills that you can develop as part of a PhD, they are many: methodological skills, research skills, how to perform research with in a disciplined manner. It's about how to capitalize on results, how to use them, exploit them through scientific communication, or it might have something to do with patents, industrial patents. It's about training, it's about supervision. During your PhD, you can supervise people, teams, you can coordinate projects, and you might also get a taste of teaching. So it's all of these skills that really characterize a young doctor. And for each doctor to have the right level, everything that is acquired through research experience during the PhD helps, but then you have training that is given by the doctoral school. So there are 3 parts of this. There's the professional project, there is the scientific and technical training in the field, but there's also training that's more general, let's say, based on different themes. So there's a minimum number of training hours that the doctoral student has to follow during the PhD. Thank you very much. I suggest that we now look at some questions that we've been sent. So the first question is from Eliza and Mohammed. Do you have to have good marks in order to do a PhD? I can answer that question. You don't have to be a genius, which was part of the question, sorry. The doctoral school generally, when they're thinking of recruiting somebody, when the future supervisors are thinking of recruiting somebody, they need to be able to know that the potential doctoral student has the right level. So if somebody has been able to have their diploma without any major problem, if there's a good assessment of the master's dissertation, these are all good conditions for being accepted. What we don't want is to take on somebody for a PhD and put them in a dangerous situation. That's our approach. We have to check that there are no obstacles or failings, so that you have to have a minimal level, yes. You have to be among the first 4 or 5 of your class, let's say. So, do we propose the subject or is it the university? That's another question. So it might be both. You might suggest your subject. If you know researchers, you can go and talk to them about it. This is possible. You can have private financing and access the PhD that way. Otherwise, there are all doctoral school competitions. So it's the university that suggests the subject and then you apply, you sit the competition exam, and that's another way of doing a PhD. So do you have to apply directly to the thesis offers posted by the lab, or do you go via the doctoral school? It's better to look at things at the source. Then there's a question about the possibility of doing a PhD at UGA, or generally speaking in France, in a French university, and doing your research abroad. Yes, some thesis subjects make it possible to operate in that way. So we're talking about topics that are focused on themes that are often in developing countries and focusing on aid, or there might be specific themes specific to an area, or like climate questions that might be, linked to an area which is not France, for example. So how do you obtain the equivalent of a master's in France when you're foreign? Well, in the registration form for a PhD, you provide information about your diplomas, the marks, and then it's the doctoral school that studies the application and is then able to say whether the training followed and the results obtained are enough to be admitted to a PhD. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Fabrice and Zoe, for your precious testimonials. We're now going to hear from 2 new people to talk about international mobility, joint supervision, and international welcomes. So, we must remember that the PhD is the highest level of university diploma in France and across the world. It's recognized internationally and better than others. The PhD in particular in France is a passport for international adventures. This is what 33% of our doctoral students choose, but now we are going to discuss 2 aspects: mobility opportunities within the framework work of a thesis and the joint supervision of a thesis. So Stephanie Dalpont, hello. So you are Deputy Director in charge of International Relations at the UGA Doctoral College. Manuel Venier, hello. Hello. You are the head of the International Students and Scholars Office. So that's the ISSO. Thank you very much for joining us. My first question is for Stefano. So we've already discussed this, but I'd like to come back to the question of topics and funding. We have many international students with us, and they are wondering how to find a topic and funding when they are abroad. Can you tell us about Campus France and scholarship programs abroad? That's an interesting question. It's often the first question that you ask yourself. How am I going to finance my research, my PhD, my stay abroad in France? So lots of things have been covered by Fabrice already. So the best way is to look at calls for projects that are already offered by future supervisors. So look at the these.fr site, Libre Access for European projects. And if you come from abroad, the best point of contact is Campus France. There are offers on Campus France sites. There are people who are there to help with setting up contact locally. There are grants that are made available by Campus France, so find out more about that. I can't give you a single answer because each country has its specific characteristics. The advice that I can give is have a look at Campus France in the country that you're interested in, and you'll find detailed information that will help you to put forward your project or apply for a grant. There are other types of financing. There's an IFL grant, for example, IFL scholarships. So that's something that's available at national level in France. And then there's local financing. So there are HGA types of financing. What else can I add? The advice that was given by Fabrice is good. You've got to get in contact with the people, with future thesis supervisors. So you've got to get in contact with the local teachers with whom you might have had a good relationship or who gave you the best lessons. So often that's how the contact starts, and then everything follows on naturally from that. Thank you very much. Wada, you were in this situation after completing your master's degree in Tunisia. How did you go about finding your topic? As I said already, at the end of my internship, there was an offer sent to me and I applied. And after several exchanges with my supervisor, I was taken on. So I went to Tunisia to apply for my visa, etc. And then I came back. And that's how it all went. So who was the offer sent from? From my supervisor. So I received it directly. So you were already in contact with that supervisor? Not exactly, but there are thesis offers. Well, supervisors advertise subjects on sites, or they send out mails, and then we receive offers by mail and we apply directly on Adoom. So there are other platforms, there are other websites too that advertise thesis offers. I can't remember exactly which site it was, but which other sites there are. Thank you very much. So embassies and Campus France offices around the world are good resources for finding out about funding. I would like to take this opportunity to thank them for promoting this forum and for their online presence for some of them. Stefano, we mentioned joint supervision as a source of funding, but can you explain what joint supervision is and how it works? Yes, so joint supervision is a system. It's an administrative system. I don't really like that word administrative, but that's what it is. It provides you with the possibility of obtaining a dual diploma. So you do a PhD over a determined time, usually 3 years, with just one defense, one thesis subject, one jury. The ultimate objective is to obtain a diploma which is validated by 2 universities, UGA and the partner university. So why do I talk about an administrative system? Well, because we're known for administration in France, but of course there are rules that have to be followed. It's a diploma that is delivered by the state, so obviously there are rules that have to be followed in both countries. The rules are that you have to spend a certain amount of time in each country, at least 1/3 of your time in each of the countries, so a minimum. So if it's a 3-year thesis, you have to spend at least 1 year in one of the 2 countries. And then there are other rules. In France, it's 3 years for a PhD, but in other countries, it might be 4 or 5 years. So you've got to find a compromise. Then there's the question of the jury. There are 2 rapporteurs for a thesis, but that's not the case in all countries. So these are all aspects that have to be anticipated and negotiated so that you don't encounter any nasty surprises 1 week before you defend your thesis. So you've got to have a joint supervision contract that is individual. So this is made to measure, so to speak. Each one might be different or slightly different. So these are aspects that have to be anticipated. So you have to make sure you do things well ahead of time. So for joint supervision, you've got 2 teams, and you're hoping to obtain a dual diploma. The Doctoral College is there to help as well. There are people who work in the Doctoral College who have a lot of experience. There's a lot of goodwill everywhere, and there's the possibility of setting up compromises. For example, a minimum duration of a stay in each country might be based on a compromise. So you mustn't be afraid. So I use the word administrative system, but don't be afraid. What is really important is that you have to anticipate. Generally speaking, you have to finish all the formalities for joint supervision after the first year of your thesis. Now, the duration varies. It might take several weeks or several months to set everything up. And it really depends on the country, on the university. And, if it's with a university that we've already worked with, that simplifies things. If there's already a framework agreement, for example, we can use that. But if it's a new collaboration, a new joint supervision request, it's possible, but it has to be done from scratch. So you have to make sure you do things well ahead of time. Michaela, you were in a joint supervision program with the University of Cassino. Can you share your experience with us? Remind us how you found your joint supervision program and how it was funded.
Alors, donc, c'était mon choix.
Yes, it was my choice. At the end of my master's, there was a proposal to do a PhD in Italy and in France. When I left for Grenoble, my professors in Italy already knew the teachers in France. As already said, it's very important to know people at the university where you're going so that there's some contact between the 2 universities. So that's why I had this opportunity to do a joint master's, because there were already links between the 2 universities. Then when there was this suggestion to do the PhD in both countries, I suggested that we do it as a joint supervision program. They said, oh, yes. So a joint supervision program, they said, okay. So in Italy and in France, it's 3 years to do a PhD, so there was no problem there in terms of the duration. It was the same duration. But when I started, so I did the competition, and I won the grant in Italy. So my contract was financed by Italy. My salary came from the Italian university. So I'd won the competition. I'd started my PhD on the 1st of November 2022, if I'm not wrong. And we started, after I'd won the scholarship, I started the admin procedures for the joint supervision. So it took 6 months, but it wasn't a problem. I wasn't worried because I'd already got my scholarship. I had a salaried position. I'd started my PhD, but I didn't have any big problems from an admin point of view or organizational point of view. I think things were very well organized. For the training side of things, as a doctoral student, you have to follow obligatory training, so 120 hours of training. But in a joint supervision program, you do half in one country and half in the other. In the contract that Stefano was mentioning, there's the obligation to spend at least 1 year out of 3 years. So that's a minimum, 1 out of 3 years in each country. In my specific case, I spent a year and a half in one country and a year and a half in the other. But that's because it was necessary in terms of the lab tools that I wanted to use. And something else that I can say, in my case, it really depends on the contract, but in going abroad for me, I was paid by Italy. When I went abroad, I had an extra grant, 50% more than the initial scholarship was given to me. It was because I was going abroad, because of the cost of life, because of the rent that you have to pay in Italy and then the rent that you have to pay abroad. So you receive financial assistance to manage that international mobility. And honestly, what I can say sincerely is that when you're doing a joint PhD, there are joint possibilities. So it's very important to have contacts so that you can develop your life in academia. And being in the 2 universities means that you share your life with twice as many people. You're part of different conferences, you exchange with lots of different people. Because you've got 4 supervisors, which is my case, that means lots of contacts for postdoc studies afterwards. That's my case. So I'm asking all of my supervisors if they have any possibilities, and they've given me some for afterwards. Thank you. So Stefano, is there anything that you have to pay attention to, any obstacles, any advice that you would give to a student? Well, the main error is censoring yourself. You shouldn't be afraid of doing a joint PhD and spending some time in France and then some time in another country. It's a very enriching experience from a personal point of view. It means that you get to know different people, a different culture. It's very enriching from a scientific point of view. You work with the skills in a foreign country. So there's the possibility of making progress from a scientific point of view. It's true for the students, but it's also true for the supervisors following them. It's an opportunity for learning and for setting up other relationships. It provides new opportunities for everybody. The opportunities are not as limited when it's not a joint program. And the other piece of advice, it's important to anticipate, to think ahead. I'm insisting on that. It's very important. Sometimes you've got to take a step back in order to project yourself further forward. So, maybe you come to France to do your master's too, your second year of master's. This will give you an idea of the culture. It will help you with the language. It will allow you to set up contacts. And while you're there, while you're in France, so you might think about doing a joint PhD program, and it might be facilitated thanks to that experience. Michaela, we've already talked about financing. Is there any specific financing for joint supervision PhDs in France and at UGA? Well, there's no specific financing for joint supervision thesis, but there is financing for facilitating international mobility. So it's not specific to a jointly supervised thesis. So the answer is yes, there is financing at UGA and at national level as well. There's a scholarship that's proposed by Campus France. Thank you. So you will have understood international studies are part of the PhD and it's recommended. There are different financing systems here at UGA, in the doctoral schools and in the labs. Stefano, can you tell us a little bit more about that? Well, I don't know if I've got very much to add, really. It can be on a case-by-case basis. For Michaela, this was the case. She had a foreign scholarship that was then completed by her laboratory. So it was her supervisors who gave her additional means. So this is something that can happen, but you can also have support from a private company. You might have other types of grants. There are different mechanisms. So the main point of contact is the supervisor. That's and contact that you might have between two universities if it's a joint program. So it's important to get into contact with these people and explore the possibilities. Thank you very much. Manuel Vignier, you are head of the International Students and Scholars Office. What is the role of the role of the structure within UGA? So the ISSO, it's there for students, researchers, doctoral students, and their accompanying families. So it's really dedicated, it's specialized for international public. It's there to help with their specific problems. So our objective is to facilitate the preparation of their stay, their arrival, their settlement, but also to help them throughout their stay with any questions or problems that might arise over the course of their stay. Obviously, it's on their arrival that there are a lot of things that have to be, that there are lots of things that might come up, but things can also come up over the course of their time, health problems, for example. So we're there to help them with problems like this. So, in order to do a PhD, what kind of status do you have to have? So, for non-European students, they have to have an authorization before they come to France. Or if they're already present in France and they want to extend their stay, they have to ask for a visa or a residency permit. There's two statuses for a PhD in France. You can have a student status or you can have a researcher talent status. It depends on your doctoral contract, your work contract. If you have a doctoral contract, you'll have access to the research talent status. Both statuses are more or less equivalent. So you can do your PhD in France with a student status. The researcher's talent status facilitates things, especially if you're applying for a visa, especially if you come with your family. family. Your family is helped, or children, so it's easier if you have the researcher status. And also for people who want to stay longer in France, it allows them to access to longer duration residency permits, so they can then stay longer, and maybe 10 years. So for those listening to us, after your PhD, you can also extend your stay in France. There are authorizations to stay can be extended if you're a student or a researcher. So a PhD student can stay an extra year minimum in order to look for a job in public research or in the private world. You can create a company. There are possibilities there as well. Thank you very much. So, Wada, I believe you benefited from the services offered by ISSO. What did they do for you specifically? Was it useful when you arrived or even before you arrived? I think you were contacting them a bit later, no? Well, I'm the counterexample of people, I would say, in the same situation. So I didn't contact ISSO to begin with, and I regretted this. So I was kind of split between getting my visa, getting my residency permit, even for housing. I didn't know that there were websites for this. So I'd really like to thank my supervisor who guided me through all of the different approaches. But then I asked ISSO about my vital card, which is my healthcare card, and they were really good at getting back to me. I think Emmanuel can talk about the services provided by ISSO better than me, but there are services, and it's important that students be aware of those services. So let's go back to Manuel. So sometimes doctoral students speak French, but sometimes they don't. If I want to come to Grenoble, what can ISSO do for me? Well, whether you're French speaking or not, there's no difference for us. We're there to provide help to all of to everybody in French and in English. So what can we do concretely on top of what has already mentioned? Well, the first question asked, and the first problem that comes up is that of housing. So we try and help students find a house. No, the university doesn't have any housing directly, so we put them in contact with people who do offer housing, and we facilitate their contact with them. We inform them about the different conditions, the prices of housing in Grenoble, how they can look for housing. We try and raise awareness about traps that they might fall into. So we help them as well when they arrive with their first procedures, signing up for health insurance, for example. There's a specific system, and there are different insurance contracts that have to be set up. We help them to set up a bank account if necessary. We help them to understand the public transport system. We tell them whether they can drive in France with a foreign driving license, for example. So it's really all of these very practical aspects, not necessarily linked to research. So we try and provide them with the first series of answers, and if we can't, we put them into contact with other people. So we also help them with their families. Researchers come with families, doctoral students might come with families. So children have to go to school, so we can help them with that as well. So how do we provide that assistance? Well, we make available the information bilingually, so in French and English, on the UGA portal. It's a website where future doctoral students will find a whole series of information about how to prepare for their stay, their housing, health insurance in France, all of these themes. There are practical data sheets. So we provide them with guides. There are PDF guides in French and in English. So these have a more chronological approach in terms of the different procedures. And so they can find information on the website, in the guides. So we've also got a center on the campus here in Grenoble, but also in Valence. because there are research centers in Valence, about an hour away from Grenoble. So on both sites, we've got a center, and people can come to the center with questions. You know, if you're a doctoral student, you can come along and see us, and if we can help, we will help, or we will point you in the right direction. Thank you very much for all of those details. As you would have understood, the UGA is clearly international. There are over 150 nationalities represented, 11,000 international students. Stefano, Wada, and Michaela, you are all three foreigners. What can you tell us about this international culture at UGA and more broadly in Grenoble? Yes. As I said already, in a joint supervision program means that I can take part in the academic life in Italy, but also in France. In Italy, at the university where I am, there are different programs, international programs, master's programs or bachelor's programs. So we've got lots of foreign students there already, Ethiopians, Afghans, so people from these countries and others. So I talk a lot with them. When you do a PhD, as we've already said, you can also be involved in teaching. So you might exchange with other nationalities, especially when you're giving lessons. Then there's the conference side of things. So conferences might not be just next door to where you're doing your thesis. So you might have to go to somewhere else to take part in a conference. And there are lots of Italians who go to conferences, but then you have lots of other nationalities who go to conferences. So the international side of conferences is very, very present. When I arrived in France, I didn't speak one word of French. So everything was in English, so that you can get by with English. But from an academic point of view, English is probably more important than the mother tongue of the country where you are. If you want to take part in conferences, English is the international language for scientific communication. So conferences are very international, and then you have the day-to-day aspects. So in France, I shared a lot of work experience, especially in the labs with people who came from lots of different other universities, from the United States, for example, England, you know, lots of different countries. So there's a continuous exchange with other nationals. So this international aspect for me was very much present. I was in France, but in the lab, when you close your door, you might be anywhere. You don't really feel as though you're in a country with a specific culture because of the international dimension. Do you share that point of view? Yes. Now, my subject is very multidisciplinary. It's cross-disciplinary. So I had the opportunity, I was fortunate enough to be able to collaborate with experts in different fields, in IT, experts in history, in material science. Thank you. Perhaps we can answer some questions from the public now. Andres is asking, what financing do you have for France for joint supervision PhDs? We've already mentioned that, I think. Perhaps you could just... Yeah, well, yes, if you like. So there is local financing, specific financing with UGA. There's the mobility scholarship. There's the ISSO scholarship, that's national.
Il y a Campus France,
There's
effectivement, qui est un
Campus
peu,
France,
j'insiste un peu, c'est l'interlocuteur privilégié
so
pour
which is the main
quand on
point
vient
of
de l'étranger.
contact when you come from
Et ça,
abroad.
effectivement, on ne l'a pas évoqué, mais il y a,
And there's
selon
something we
les pays,
haven't
des financements
mentioned.
qui sont proposés
You
par
know,
des pays étrangers.
some
On l'a pas
foreign
évoqué, mais encore une
countries
fois, on a un
might
très bon exemple
offer
avec
scholarships, although
Michaela,
I
qui a pu
forgot we have a
bénéficier
good
effectivement
example with
d'un
Michaela.
financement
She got her
étranger et
financing from
qui lui a permis
abroad,
de venir
from
en France
Italy,
de
and
manière
that's
assez
what allowed
facile.
her to come to France quite
Très bien.
easily.
Et donc, du coup, on a une question particulière sur
So
les
we have a
co-tutelles. C'est
question
dans le
about
cas où on
joint
est déjà inscrit en
supervision
doctorat au sein de
PhDs. When
l'UGA,
you're
est-ce qu'il est
already
possible de faire une
signed up for a
co-tutelle après 1
PhD,
an ou 2 ans de
can
doctorat?
you switch to a
Disons, la
jointly
réponse c'est oui.
supervised PhD
Si on est
after a
déjà
year?
inscrit, il est
Yes,
possible
if
de
you're
monter
already signed up for a
un
PhD
contrat
and
de
you're doing a
cotutelle. Après,
PhD, you
comme je le
can
disais, il y a
switch that to a
les
jointly
timings
supervised
qui risquent
thesis.
de coincer. Ça
Although
demande
it is
quelques
a
mois,
question
on
of
peut dire,
timing
pour
as well.
monter ces contrats de cotutelle. Donc, je dirais la fin de la première année, c'est un peu
So the end of the
la
first
date
year is
limite,
kind of the
la deadline, on
maximum,
va
it's
dire,
the
pour
deadline, if you
essayer
like.
de monter cette cotutelle.
Très bien. Et une question très importante
And
de
then there's a
Laura
very important question
qui
from
demande
Laura.
si on doit avoir un niveau minimum en français
Is
pour
it
faire un
important to have a
doctorat
minimal
en
level of
France, même si la
French
thèse est
to
écrite
do
en
a
anglais
PhD,
et
even if
l'anglais était
your
accepté pour la
thesis
rédaction de la thèse
is
et
in
la
English?
communication
And
en
is English
laboratoire?
acceptable for communication in the laboratory
La
and for
réponse était
writing
déjà
the
donnée,
PhD?
mais
We've already given the
je peux
answer to that
rebondir.
question.
Moi, c'était tout en anglais.
Yes,
Quand
everything was
j'étais,
in
c'était en
English.
anglais.
I
Quand j'ai commencé, je
drafted
parlais
my
pas un mot
thesis
de
in
français.
English. When I started, I
Donc,
didn't speak
je
a
me suis
word of
dit, je vais
French.
pas le faire en français.
So I
Et donc,
didn't
ouais,
want to
c'était
do
tout
my
en anglais.
thesis in
Donc,
French.
la
Everything was
rédaction de
in
la thèse et
English.
la
I
soutenance, tout c'était en
wrote
anglais.
my
Je
thesis
pense
in
qu'effectivement, c'est
English and
très
defended
important
my
qu'on
thesis
rebondisse
in
bien
English.
dessus.
Yes,
C'est-à-dire
it's
que
important
quand
to
on
underline
arrive au
that.
diplôme du doctorat,
When you get to
en fait,
doctoral level,
l'anglais étant la langue
English,
internationale, c'est
being
l'anglais
the
qui est
international language,
privilégié
is
généralement
what takes
au sein des
priority
laboratoires.
in a
Donc, bien sûr, on peut
laboratory.
communiquer dans
Obviously, you
notre
can
langue maternelle. Par exemple,
communicate in
si
your
moi je suis
mother tongue.
française,
If
je vais
I'm
communiquer en
French, I
français.
will communicate
Mais
in French.
pour les
But
articles, pour la
for
thèse, tout peut
articles,
être
for the
rédigé en
thesis,
anglais. Et
everything
c'est
can be
pas une
drafted in
condition sine
English.
qua non
But it's
de
not
pouvoir parler
so it's not
français
a sine
au
qua non
début de notre
condition to
doctorat.
speak French at the
C'est
start of a
pas le
PhD
cas il y a
in
quelques
France.
Oui, ça a
Wasn't
beaucoup
malheureusement, ça, je l'ai
progressé.
connu
So things
d'une
have
manière
changed.
directe, si on veut.
Things have
J'avais
changed a
vécu un peu
lot.
la même situation, je parlais pas un mot de
So
français.
I didn't speak a word of French when I
Et bon,
arrived
j'ai
in
pu me mettre.
France, and
Mais je
things
dirais
were different
aussi,
then.
c'est un peu Grenoble aussi qui est un peu un cas particulier. Pour donner quelques
Just to
chiffres
give you
qui
some
peut-être ne
figures
sont pas les toutes
now,
dernières, mais environ
about
47% des doctorants
47% of doctoral
grenoblois
students
sont
in Grenoble
internationaux, sont des étrangers.
are
Donc,
foreign
c'est quand même un
students.
nombre important. Il y
That's
a
quite a high
10% des
number.
thèses qui sont en
10% of
cotutelle.
theses are
De
jointly
mémoire, c'est un
supervised
peu le double
theses.
par rapport à la moyenne nationale
So that's
sur les thèses en
double
cotutelle.
the
Donc,
national
l'ISSO
average, I
qui existe à
believe.
Grenoble, pas forcément dans toutes les
So
universités.
we've got ISSO,
Et
and you
l'aspect
don't
de la
have that
langue, on
in
le disait,
all
bon, dans les
universities.
laboratoires, on parle anglais, bien
In the
évidemment, mais aussi
labs, you
pour
can
tous
speak
les services
English,
administratifs,
but also in any kind of admin
le personnel parle anglais, en
department, you
fait.
know,
Donc,
the staff
quand on
speak
a des
English.
difficultés
So when there
confrontantes,
are
on a un
difficulties,
interlocuteur, on
there
sait
is
où
somebody
aller.
who can help you
Et
in
encore une fois, c'est pas
English.
quelque chose qu'on retrouve
This
partout.
is not something
Et
that
surtout,
is
ça doit pas être
possible
un facteur
everywhere.
qui limite la
So
volonté
don't
de
feel
venir à
limited
Grenoble
by
pour
the fact that you don't
faire
speak
une
French
thèse.
Très bien,
and you
merci.
want
Il y
to do
avait
a
une question
PhD
assez
here.
importante, c'est est-ce
There's
que
another important
l'ISSO est
question.
un
ISO,
programme payant ou pas?
is it a paying program or not?
C'est un service public
No, it's a
et donc
public
c'est accessible
service,
à
so
tous
it's
les futurs
accessible to
doctorants
all
de l'UGA de manière
future doctoral
gratuite.
students. It's
La différence avec
free.
un service payant, c'est qu'on va moins faire du
With a
clé en
paying
main, c'est-à-dire qu'on va
service,
pas vous donner les clés du logement
it's
directement,
different
mais on
from
va vous
paying
accompagner
service.
vraiment dans le montage
We
des données,
provide
seulement
you
c'est
with
complètement
help,
gratuit.
but we don't,
Ok, très bien.
and it's
Et donc,
completely
du coup,
free.
j'aimerais finir ces interventions avec une question un petit peu
So I'm
particulière.
going to
Parce
finish
que,
with a very
effectivement, quand
specific
on
question.
vit un doctorat,
When you
la fin, c'est la
experience a
soutenance. Et
PhD,
c'est un moment qui reste gravé dans
you
toute la
know that
mémoire.
the
Michaela,
defense is
tu l'as
coming up.
vécu il n'y a pas très longtemps.
Michaela,
Quel est ton
you
ressenti
defended
sur
your
ce
thesis
grand
not long
moment
ago.
du
How did you
doctorat?
feel about it?
Incroyable.
Incredible,
Je pense vraiment c'était
really.
sans exagérer la journée plus
Without
belle de ma vie.
exaggerating, it was the most beautiful day of my
C'est
life.
trop, c'est une émotion très
The
très
emotion
particulière.
is at its
C'est un
highest.
peu, tu comprends vraiment que tu
You
as terminé
really
un parcours de 3 ans.
understand that you've come to the
Et
end of
pendant les
that
3 ans, tu
3-year
comprends
path,
pas, tu vois pas la fin, tu te dis, oh, est-ce que j'y arriverai jamais?
and
Et,
you
et
wonder
puis
if you're going
là,
to get there.
c'est ta journée parce
But
que
on that
il y a
day,
que
it's
toi
your
en face du
day.
jury.
You're there
Très fière
alone
de toi.
in front of
Donc,
your jury.
je me
You're
suis
very
sentie
proud of
fière de
yourself.
moi
I
d'avoir
felt very proud
réussi
of
ce
myself.
parcours.
I'd managed to
Et en
come through
plus,
my
il y a le fait
PhD.
qu'il y avait
And then my family was there, my friends were there. So for me, it's very important to share things like this with family and friends. So it really was excellent. So it was the most beautiful day of my life. Okay, I think we can end on that very positive note. So I'd like to thank our doctoral students, Michaela, Mohamed, Zoe, as well as Manuel, Stefano, and Fabrice from the UGA. Thank you to all the students online. If you have any further questions, please feel free to ask the Doctoral College of UGA, and they will answer any outstanding questions. So the address is provided in the chat. Please stay tuned because now we're going to introduce you to one of our 13 thematic doctoral schools. Most of you are enrolled in one of them. So there are two possible scenarios. Either you are assigned directly by the organization to the room corresponding to your chosen doctoral school using the name of the school, or you can choose your doctoral school now by clicking on the Room Assignments button at the bottom to display the room panel and the list of doctoral schools. Then click on Join. Feel free to join the school of your choice now. And for those who do not know which doctoral school to join, I can help you by giving you a quick overview. So in room 1, it's the Chemistry and Life Sciences Doctoral School. It offers a wide range of subjects with 15 specializations ranging from chemistry to biology and health, with a strong focus on structural biology, ontogenesis and oncogenesis, neuroscience, molecular chemistry, chemistry for life sciences, microbiology and virology, plant biology and ecology. There is a second doctoral school, EDISCE, so for health, cognition and the environment, which I will present later. In room 2, you've got the Doctoral School of Electronics, Electrical Engineering, Automation and Signal Processing, or the EATS Doctoral School. It offers 5 specializations: Automation and Industrial Engineering, Electrical Engineering, Signals, Images, Speech and Telecommunications, Optics and Radio Frequencies, Nanoelectronics and Nanotechnologies. In room 3, there is the Doctoral School of Engineering, Materials, Mechanics, Environment, Energy, Processes and Production, or IMEP ×2. It offers 5 specializations in engineering, electrochemistry, mechanics, civil engineering, materials, fluid mechanics, energy, processes, industrial engineering, design and production. Number 4, the Doctoral School of Engineering for Health, Cognition and the Environment, ISSE. It trains doctoral students in data acquisition, processing and modeling engineering with a view to elucidating the mechanisms involved in the major functions of living systems. So it looks at their relationship with their environment, cognition and action. It focuses on 5 specializations: biotechnology, instrumentation, signals and imaging for biology, medicine and the environment, models, methods and algorithms in biology, health and the environment, cognitive sciences, cognitive psychology, neurocognition, engineering for cognition, interaction, learning and creation, movement and behavior for health and autonomy. In room 5, you have the Doctoral School for Languages, Literature and the Humanities. So LLSH, this represents research in literature, languages, language sciences, teaching, communication, journalism, and the arts. In room 6, you will find the Doctoral School for Mathematics, Information Science and Technology, Computer Science, MSTII. This doctoral school offers 4 specializations: mathematics, applied mathematics, mathematics, computer science. At UGA, we are fortunate to have one of France's 4 interdisciplinary institutes in artificial intelligence. From this perspective, the doctoral school benefits from a large number of thesis topics, high-level research outcomes, and partnerships with businesses. In room 7, we have the Doctoral School of Philosophy, Philo. It focuses on a single theme, but develops 3 areas in particular: practices, values, norms, institutions, mind and cognition, and history of philosophy. In room 8, you will find the Doctoral School of Physics, Phys. This covers 8 specializations: astrophysics and dilute media, nanophysics, applied physics, condensed matter and radiation physics, materials physics, subatomic and astroparticle physics, theoretical physics, physics for life sciences. In room 9, you will find the Doctoral School of Economics, SE. This covers the following topics: industrial economics, economic policy, international economics, experimental economics, consumption, energy, innovation, labor, sustainable development, currency. In room 10, you will find the Doctoral School of Management Sciences. It operates in the field of management sciences and management through 5 specializations: finance, accounting, control, auditing, human resources management, strategic management, entrepreneurship, innovation, marketing, information systems, supply chain management. In room 11, there is the Doctoral School of Human, Political and Territorial Sciences, SHPT. It's a multidisciplinary school offering 14 specializations that can be grouped around research themes such as sociology, education sciences, psychology, history, art and science history, political science, geography, urban planning, and architecture. In room 12, you will find the Doctoral School of Law. It has 9 specializations: public administration, European, international criminal and private law, human rights, history of law, international security, and defense. Finally, in the last room, room 13, you will find my doctoral school, the Doctoral School of Earth, Environmental and Planetary Sciences, the STEP School. This is a school with 3 specializations: Earth and Environmental Sciences, Physical and Environmental Geography, Planetary Sciences. I hope you have now found your school of choice. This concludes my presentation. Thank you again for attending. We hope that this forum has helped you learn more about doctoral studies in France, and we look forward to seeing you soon at the UGA for your PhD.